There are 5 things that are needed to develop an ethical organizational culture. First is attention to moral implications. Ethic needs to be always an explicit aspect of how business is done in a certain organization. Communicating the message that we care about ethics needs to be reinforced, needs to be always emphasized within a certain organizational culture. And this could be done in a variety of ways, including having a code of conduct, having a relevant mission statement, a clear mission statement that includes ethics as an important dimension, and taking ethics into consideration in every decision that an organization makes. That's the first one. The second one is clarifying expectations. Sometimes people commit mistakes or commit unethical things because they don't know what they are expected to do. Ethical awareness is not only about individual responsibility. Companies have a role to play in terms of elevating the ethical awareness and ethical consciousness of their employees. For example, companies may require their employees to undergo certain types of training, and in that training, ethical expectations would be relayed to employees, sometimes in terms of giving them certain scenarios of what will you do if you are faced with that sort of situation, and that could be important as well. Number 3 is the importance of having a role model, and role modeling really is one of the most important dimensions of having an ethical culture. People need to see ethics not only what people need to understand that ethics is more about saying that we need to be ethical. It's about walking the walk rather than just talking the talk. And remember that a role model does not need to be a supervisor or the CEO of a company. A role model can exist in any corner inside a certain organization. Number 4 pertains to the reward structure. So the reward structure of the employee of the company needs to be aligned with ethics, and so that a company would reward ethical behaviors, and it would penalize unethical behavior. So aligning the reward structure with ethics is also very important, and it sends a clear message that ethics is important to us. And finally, number 5, companies need to make ethics an important aspect in their recruitment decisions. And we call this smart recruiting. Companies need to have the ethical sensitivity, or to assess the ethical sensitivity of their employees as they enter the organization. And they need to terminate, obviously, employees who do not properly adhere to the ethical requirements of the organization. Smart companies deal with recruitment as a strategic activity. So what is the role of leaders in all of this? What is the role of leaders in inculcating an ethical culture inside the organizations? Leaders play a fundamental role in shaping ethical organizational cultures, because without capable leaders, without ethical leaders, employees have no yardstick to measure their performance against. So it's very important to have ethical leadership that would reinforce an ethical culture or an ethical organization. The dimensions of ethical leadership includes 5 dimensions as well. The first is the strength of character. Leaders need to have the necessary virtues to act in an ethical manner. They are honest, they are trustworthy, they have integrity. And integrity is a very important word to say. Leaders, based on their self-awareness, they are aware of those values, and they are willing, and they are actually passionate about aligning their behaviors with those values. They do not discriminate against others, obviously. They do not involve themselves in other ethical wrongdoings, such as bribery and what have you. The second important dimension of ethical leadership is consideration and respect. Leaders need to consider the rights of others, whether they are employees or whether they are other stakeholders. Ethical leaders have a genuine concern for others. They recognize that the right for respect is a universal right, and in dealing with their employees, even employees are underperforming, respect should always be there. Ethical leaders also are aware that other people with whom they interact, they have other values. So we need not have the same sort of values. Definitely the values of integrity and ethical behavior and good sense of character. There are certain values which we need to have common among all of us, but we don't need to be copies of each other. So an ethical leader is aware of the values of others. He or she understands that some people have different values than theirs. They are able to empathize with other individuals given this difference in values. The third dimension is courage. To behave ethically requires a degree of moral courage. Sometimes you have to make the tough decision, a decision that others are not willing to make. Ethics or ethical behavior is not always easy to do. So a person needs to have that sort of courage in order to do the right thing. Ethical leaders are not afraid to swim against the current when it's necessary. A fourth dimension of ethical leadership is accountability. And I find this to be very important in our culture, in our Arab culture, because we have a problem of lack of accountability. Sometimes we like our leaders, whether in private organizations or even in the public sector or even in the political life. We don't hold our leaders accountable to their doings, whether it's right or wrong. And connecting this sort of dimension to what we're seeing nowadays in terms of the events that have been around us in Lebanon raises a certain concern or raises a certain question. Do we hold our leaders accountable, or are leaders willing to hold themselves accountable to others? A key dimension of ethical leadership is that they are not hesitant to hold themselves accountable to others. They are willing to put some sort of a statement of account, what they have done and what they have not done. Accountability is very important. And there is some research that has shown that that dimension is lacking in our region. I did some research with a colleague of mine, and we tried, based on interviews, we interviewed students, we interviewed employees, we interviewed students who were undergraduates and graduates. And we're trying to, when we asked those respondents about what are the traits of good leaders, and then we asked another question, what are the traits of ethical leaders? We had many good questions, such as morality, integrity, ethical behavior, having a high level of ethical sensitivity, doing the right things, etc. But we found out that the word accountability did not emerge. People did not really think too much about accountability as an important dimension of ethical leadership or an important dimension of good leadership. Compare this to other research, similar research that has been done in other parts of the world. To them, whether in the West or other parts of the world, studies have found that accountability is key to how they think. So leaders, when they talk about what are the elements of a good leader or a good character in leaders, accountability emerged as a salient, important dimension. In our sample here in Lebanon, we did not find this to be very important to our respondents, whether they were leaders themselves or whether they were followers to leaders, employees. The final dimension that I want to emphasize here is also role modeling. And now you realize the importance of role modeling. So an ethical leader is willing to act as a role model to others. They act as role models to their employees. They are aware that they occupy a central position in their work units or in the teams or in the whole organization, and they are willing to walk the talk, not only talk the talk. Walking the walk means that a leader does not only talk about ethics, about the importance of doing the right thing, but they are willing to do the right thing. So preaching alone never works, actually. Sometimes it's counterproductive to preach one thing and then act a different thing.